Welcome everybody. It's Thursday, October 11th, and I am very, very pleased to bring these two guests together for the first time. I've got Michael Barden, of course, targeted individual. That's strange. For some reason, I am not getting you guys on here. Stand by for just a second. There's always interesting things going on. We're going to get it resolved right now. I'm going to be introducing today Brian Vukadinovich and Michael Barden. And of course, everyone remembers Brian, who joined us just last week. Brian is a retired school teacher who became targeted by local police after a case of mistaken identity resulted in the police being reprimanded by a judge and then taking out their personal vendetta on Brian, targeting him at his home, beating him up, approaching the school board to have Brian wrongly dismissed from his job there. And Brian prevailed in a pro se case against the school board. People may recall, of course, that Michael is facing criminal charges. Michael, tell us what the charge you're facing is and what the status of the case is.
Aggravated assault with a firearm and disorderly conduct. There's two charges. Actually, there were three initially. They dropped two of them within a week, and then it was just the aggravated assault with firearm. I said just, but that was the only one left. So now they're telling me there's the aggravated assault with firearm and the disorderly conduct. So the plea deal that they've offered me now, after I just went to what they call a settlement meeting here in Arizona. I don't know if it's the same everywhere else, but I went to a settlement meeting with soon-to-be federal judge Susan Brinovich, and I sat down with them, and I thought it would be kind of like a negotiation thing, where I say, hey, I give them some information, they think about it, and they review the case. And basically, it wasn't that; it was them explaining to me the details of the plea deal, and that was it. So there wasn't anything settling about it. It was just, okay, here's the conditions of the plea deal. So what they're saying, the plea deal that they're offering me is probation, 1.5 years, 2 years of probation. I have to undergo psychological evaluation with whoever they send me to, and they are not requesting any jail time at all. So that the judge could still say, well, they didn't request any jail time, but I'm going to go ahead and send you for a couple months because I feel like it. But that's the deal that they are offering me right now.
Now, Michael, I want to bring Brian up to speed a bit, as well as the audience that's joining us, because of course many people have seen you before. If they aren't currently following you on Twitter, they can do that. People can find you on Twitter at Michael Barden 8. Michael is really standing up for people in the targeted individual community. Michael has become somewhat of a spokesperson. He's brought my attention to some of the other people in the community who are putting up these billboards. And of course, later in the broadcast, we'll be talking a bit about a law that has been proposed in California. It's an anti-gang stalking law. And of course, Brian is on Twitter at Motion4Justice. That's the number 4. And you can also get Brian's book, Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case. Brian, I think what you're doing is so important because more and more we've been hearing about the legal system being weaponized against citizens, against certainly members of Donald Trump's cabinet, his advisors, his business associates, his former attorneys. And this can be done with civil procedure, this can be done with criminal procedure. Of course, in Michael's case, it was somebody else who had the gun, right? You had a licensed gun in your car, but did you ever brandish the gun, point it at anybody?
No, I did not. So, but the other guy did, right? We went over the video of that, of him pointing that gun out the window.
How did they get to a gun, charge with you?
I don't know. Well, I mean, we talked about that one before. I know it's impossible to remember all this stuff, but, I'm surveilled 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they know every single thing about me. So when I would go to the store and I'd have a firearm with me, there'd be a police cruiser, fire department, medic, somebody waiting for me or arriving at the exact same time. When I would leave my firearms at home, I'd get there and there'd be no public service vehicle. And that was happening for months. I was doing like a little experiment. This, like, how did these guys know this? Do they have cameras in my house? Do they have thermal imaging devices? What's going on? So that's the only thing I can think of that how they would know that I would have had my firearm in my vehicle, because it was in the back seat. Nobody could have saw it, and
Right.
I have no other explanation.
So, Brian, if Michael's not actually wielding the gun, and he is in fact a licensed gun owner in the state of Arizona, he's exercising his Second Amendment right. Aren't they trying to violate his constitutional rights in some way?
Well, they're absolutely doing that, and there's a lot of different ways they do it. They do know how to set people up, that's for sure. And there's a history across the country of abusive police officers doing that. And when Michael was talking about how they were, learning information about him having the gun, and he didn't know that they even knew it and so forth, it just brought me back to, I started thinking about how the police in my situation, where they knew exactly where I lived. They used to drive by my house all the time, shine the spotlight on it, and then they knew exactly what route I would take to work, and they had it very convenient. It was just, oh, he leaves at this time and he comes back at this time, and then they would just stop you and arrest you. Now with Michael, in his case, it's very easy for the police to cause a nightmare for a person. All they have to do is just write down something on a charging information form, and boom, your life becomes hell after that. And then you have to, just from a simple piece of paper they write the charge on, then you have to go in and you have to argue the Constitution and so on and so forth, and the facts, and hopefully Michael has a good judge in this case that's going to recognize the fact that he in fact has a Second Amendment right to be armed, as he is licensed to be. And hopefully the judge in that case is going to recognize that and just dismiss the case against him totally, hopefully.
Do we know
it's
anything?
a blatant violation of his rights.
Do we know anything about Judge Susan Branovich?
Now, she was only the judge for the settlement meeting.
Ah.
The judge for my case is Judge Harrod, Harrod.
Huh. Okay. Judge Harrod, and that's in Maricopa County, huh?
Yes, sir.
So the reason why I like reviewing these cases and looking at the judges and everything, these are public officials, these are government officials, and whether somebody is a elected member of Congress or a sitting judge, I think it's important that we as citizens act as sort of we've checks and balances are what the government is all about. And if the old way of things being done is that judges and Congress people think that they can do all sorts of things in back rooms behind closed doors while no one is looking and no one will talk about it, we're trying to do the opposite of that. We want to educate the public as to how these matters work and how all of this comes about, because I don't think it's very reasonable for people like Brian or Michael to be targeted by the police and thrown to the wolves of a weaponized justice system. Brian, in your case, you spoke to us last week about how the judge was very aggressively trying to get you to get a lawyer, and they wanted you to sign a plea deal. Can you talk about that a bit, Brian?
Yes. Now, where the judge was trying to force me to get a lawyer, that was actually in the civil case that I won against the school corporation. Now, this criminal case here, one of many that was filed against me, which I was able to prevail on in each and every one. What they did was they were stopping me pretty much on a bi-weekly basis, and there was actually 10 arrests total, some of them with multiple charges, and then I would either have all of the charges dismissed or I would actually go to trial and win acquittals by a jury and so forth. And in this particular plea agreement you're looking at, you can see on there that they're trying to get me to plead guilty to a lesser charge, and if I would do so, I would have to. They would in turn agree to, if they dismiss that charge, I would have to in turn agree to not sue any of the police departments that have been harassing me, beat me. There was numerous beatings and arrests. So all they had to do was file a charge and then say, well, you know what? We'll pressure him. We can make him think about going to jail,
Right.
And then possibly maybe he'll think about dismissing the civil cases against all of the false arrests. I
Let's
resisted it. I said no.
and let's
I
let that
went to
soak in
trial
for a minute.
and was acquitted.
Let's let that soak in for a minute, Brian. So, what the police have the ability to do is, in you guys' cases, they bring a charge, a criminal charge. That is a crime that you haven't done. And so now the burden of proof is on you to show that you didn't do it. Even though you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, the police have a way around that. They just charge you with something. Right?
That's exactly the game that's being played across the country. It's going on all over the place, and the police know that. They know that people such as myself and Michael, and I'm sure thousands of people across the country, they're burdened with work. They have to pay for criminal defenses and worry also. I mean, there's a possibility you can still get convicted even if you're innocent,
Right.
just by if you don't have a good sharp lawyer representing you, or if you have maybe a jury that's pro-government type jury, or a bad judge. I had a judge in my case, in one of my criminal cases, that was so corrupt it was unbelievable. He allowed the police officer to switch evidence. In my case, he filed an affidavit stating that he filed an affidavit originally stating that he found empty pop cans in my car, and then he switched that affidavit before the trial, and then he testified at the trial that he found empty beer cans in my car. He didn't say anything about the pop cans. So then when I discovered that affidavit about 2 years after the criminal trial, I went back in for a post-conviction hearing, and the corruption, and you have to understand something. I hope Michael's probably in better shape there in Arizona, but in Indiana, where I'm at, I'm just going to say it in my book, I call Indiana a Ku Klux Klan state. It's
Wow.
just way behind the times, very conservative, back in the 20s. It's almost as if we're in the deep South here. So the judge in my case, his name was Paul Baldoni, and he was a very, very infected judge. And I talk about him in the book. And but this is what's going on. Judges they get in bed with the prosecutors. It's like a good old boys club that's taking place, and the citizens are the ones that have to pay.
Yeah, and it's, this is why we're doing this. They say the best disinfectant is sunlight, and I think a lot of these jurisdictions are not that far away from the days where, as you said, corruption ruled and there was no reporting, mainstream or otherwise. We're in a new era here where social media allows people like us to create a show like we're doing right now and shed some light on what might be an unpopular topic. The book that Brian's referring to, of course, is Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case, and you can purchase that book on Amazon.com. So let's talk a bit about social media and how it plays into all this, because I've found it very interesting that since we've started having Michael on the show, and there have been a number of broadcasts that we've done so far, there is one person in particular who's quite active on social media. He seems to act out against most of my guests, and he's taken a particular interest in Michael. I also want to remind people that if they are interested in financially supporting Michael, they can do that on patreon.com. Michael has a page. You can just go to patreon.com/Michael J. Barden, and you can become a monthly sponsor of Michael. He's making videos of his own, as well as posting his appearances here on Crowdsource the Truth. Additionally, you can purchase a hat from Michael's eBay store, Hats Around the World. And Michael's got a lot of rare and collectible hats and some other items there. One of the number one ways the targeting takes place is to basically attempt to financially decimate the person. Obviously, in modern life, money is something that we all need to purchase food, to travel around, certainly for a legal defense. And the collective goal is to bring the person to their knees, to give them no options but to submit. And so last week, Michael, or 2 weeks ago, whenever the last conversation we had was, you had told me that you weren't trusting your attorney. And I shared with you my opinion. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not anyone who can or would give legal advice. But just as an associate, as a friend, as somebody who knows you, I just felt if you are not feeling confident that your attorney is your advocate, you need a new attorney. Now, Brian, you've told us that you had a situation where they were trying to force attorneys on you, trying to get you to accept this plea deal that was obviously, not good. And in Michael's case, he was told there would be no prison, which of course refers to a federal prison, and that's not the same as no jail time. What do you think what are Michael's options, Brian?
Well, his options are to accept the deal. The carrot that they're dangling in front of Michael is the fact that he wouldn't have to serve any jail time. So
Prison
they want
time.
something here for sure, and they know that they know behind the scenes that they probably have a weak case that if he has a good lawyer, he could actually go in there and possibly get an acquittal. And they know that, and they don't want their image scarred either. So they're dangling a carrot in front of him, saying, "Well, but if you agree to this plea deal, you don't have to go to jail, but yet you're still going to have a guilty mark on your life the rest of your life." So that's something Michael's going to have to decide whether or not he wants to do. I'm a firm believer in, if you're not guilty of a crime, you should never be pressured into pleading guilty to a crime that you're not guilty of. And I understand that's hard to do for a lot of people because of the pressure and the finances and so forth. But with me, I'm not accepting the deal. And I respect anybody who feels that they would go ahead and respect and accept those deals, but I would not do it. I would, in Michael's case, and first of all, let me back up and say I would urge everybody to help Michael out because financially with what he's got there on his site there, because it's a very costly, it's extremely costly,
Right.
and that type of charge that he's facing here to get a top-notch lawyer would cost a lot of money. And they know that. The government knows that, and that's something that they're using as well. But if Michael is in a position to reject the deal, I mean, that's something. With me, I'm rejecting. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm gonna let the chips fall where they may.
Now, let me
I
clarify.
I do it 10 times, 10 separate times, and I never accepted a plea deal at all. I just went ahead and fought them because I thought the issue was important to do.
Sure.
And
Let me-
I would let. Oh, go ahead.
I was just wanted to ask you, Michael, to clarify. They said no prison, but then sort of tricked you and revealed that there could be jail.
Yes, correct. Two visits ago, the last court appearance, I got there and he said, "Here's the plea deal." I'm reading through it, and it said could be subject to 6 months to a year in jail. And I said, "Wait a minute! I thought you said no time in prison." "Oh, wait, okay, it's like the car dealership thing. You told me there'll be none of this over here, but then you just didn't mention the other thing." And but yeah, we're to the point now where they're saying no jail. They're not requesting any jail, any prison. Any time served, that I accept this deal and that I will just be on probation. And that because this is a felony class 6, they're reducing it from a felony class 3 to a felony class 6, that within 2 years I will be able to do what's called a set aside and be able to get my voting rights back and my right to own a firearm back. But then I have to go through the whole court process,
Right.
and then being a targeted person in general, usually everywhere you show up, your name's on some kind of list, and then they just run you through the ringer,
Yeah.
and you never get any kind of rights back. It just makes it worse.
Absolutely. The other thing I want to clarify, Michael, is that I also want people to go to patreon.com/Michael J. Barden or on eBay to Hats Around the World, because even if you aren't hiring a lawyer, this process is expensive. If you should choose to answer a civil or a criminal case pro se, that's going to take up a lot of your time, which makes it impossible for you to otherwise spend that time earning money. So it's one of these things where they're trying to get you into kind of a checkmate style situation. And it brings me to Michael Flynn. Brian, you're talking about people who are sometimes forced to accept these deals. And of course, Michael Flynn is a patriot and a military guy, way tougher than me. He's just, for practical reasons, he's got a family, he's got a wife, he's got a house, he's got expenses he's got to tend to. He might want to fight this to the finish, but for practical reasons, he may be not in the position to do that. So it's very important that people who recognize that this is a gross violation of all things that are just and an assault on the Constitution and an assault on each of us, I want to urge people to financially support these individuals, because we've got to put a stop to this.
Well, the government has a very heavy hand. They have a long arm and a heavy hand, and they know. And as you said, with Michael Flynn's situation and thousands of other people across the country, such as Michael right now, the government knows that. And it doesn't really matter to the government if you're really guilty or not. What matters to the government is once they charge you with something and they go along with the officer's request to bring you to a charge of some type, they're going to back that officer, and justice really isn't what the main interest is in these cases. It's all about power. It's all about the government stepping on people's rights. That's what it's all about. It's power.
Remember this guy that said that I pointed the gun at him as a former police officer, which he made in his statement with the police too. So it's the guy that made the statement's former police officer. Then they've got the police department that's been targeting me, arrest me. They're going to do exactly what you're saying. They're going to back those people up no matter what. They don't want to look at. I told them the same exact thing, that the guy pointed a gun at me. They arrested me. They didn't arrest him. They just decide who they're going to charge, how they're going to use their system, their weaponized system, and then go along with that.
And to reiterate, Michael, you never pointed a gun at anybody. The gun was in the car.
Correct.
Well, prime example is what you're looking at right here. This police officer right here he charged me several times and was basically laughed out of court off of his charges, and then he was found on the side of the highway at early hours of the morning, drunk out of his head, passed out with a gun between his legs, or with a gun beside him and a beer between his legs.
Jeez.
And they didn't fire him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then the police came, the police were called, and they just took him home. They didn't do like they do with everybody else and take him to jail and prosecute him. And then after that incident, then he got drunk again and crossed the center line and had a head-on and it severely injured people in the other car, and then they finally fired him. But the point is, they kept backing him when they should have fired him from the outset. But that's what they do, as Michael said, they back their own. In fact, the sheriff of Porter County, captain of the sheriff's department, when he was talking about this particular officer, Zentz, he called it honor among police. Those were his exact words when they chose not to arrest him and took him home. It was called honor among police.
Professional courtesies is what I've heard it called.
Exactly.
Wow. Now, Michael, a fellow Air Force veteran has taken to social media to belittle you and your assertions that you're a targeted individual. He's been trying to dissuade people from watching this channel, trying to defame me, and he's got quite a lot to say in terms of mocking you and I. How do you feel about a fellow Air Force veteran, a fellow emergency responder, going so far out of his way to mock you?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest backstabbing things you can do is to go after a fellow service member, a fellow former responder. So I mean, to go after anybody like this is ridiculous. But yeah, when the public services are involved, and most of the people that are listening know I was a firefighter for 5 years, crash fire rescue. I worked with police officers. I worked with other public service people, and I had a connection with those people, and then to turn around and realize that those same people that I would have given my life for in a structure fire or in some kind of auto extrication or in being deployed are coming after me now. It's the biggest feeling of betrayal, one of the biggest feelings of betrayal.
But of course, wouldn't you expect in a general sense, Michael, that if what you and I were talking about were nonsense, that most people would just ignore it? Why would someone make such a big deal out of saying something was nonsensical? It seems maybe perhaps we're onto something.
Well, because we did something that they use in their psyop on us. They try to trigger us into acting different ways, into responding. Well, we triggered this guy with the truth. So
Yeah.
he's responding. He's responding now. He was triggered by our truth, and he's got to respond now. So that tells us what? That we said something right. He's got to discredit us. Otherwise, he'd leave us alone and let us, hang ourselves with our bad information. So we're putting good information out, and now all of a sudden there's some. There was some other guy on a YouTube channel that was making some special videos about me too. So I've got two people that I've never met in person, never heard of in my life, that are interested in what I have to say and trying to discredit me, but have never contacted me. And both of these people, I've sent them an open invitation. I said, let's talk live. Contact me anytime. We'll get on Skype and we'll talk about whatever you want to live. You can tell me your side of the story and I'll tell you mine.
I think it's also interesting because, we've brought up things like InfraGard, which Susan Smith told us she was a part of many years ago prior to 9/11, and that this is a partnership between the FBI and the public to try to create this Stasi-like surveillance network, which sounds remarkably similar to what you've described in terms of regular everyday people stalking and surveilling other citizens. Susan Smith told us that she chose to leave InfraGard after September 11th, 2001, because its activities sort of changed in a way that...
Good lady.
She was a good lady. She's a constitutionalist, and she felt that some of the things that they were doing were not in line with her beliefs. I find it really interesting because this same individual who's been making lots of videos about you and lots of videos about me has made some videos that he's deleted from the internet where he seems to be recruiting and instructing a team of civilians to operate over the internet, doing essentially exactly what he's been doing to you and what they've been doing to me, trying to publicly defame us. So, Brian, what do you think? I mean, I know you can't expressly give Michael advice, but given the attention that has come to what we're talking about, it seems like there are people who want to crush my suggestion that he don't take the plea deal, that he turn away from this attorney that he doesn't trust, and that he start handling this case himself. Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I had the same suggestions to me from people. Everybody was telling me, don't take it on yourself. You could end up messing up and going to jail and so forth. And I always said, if you have the truth on your side, and then one thing we do have in this country, before they actually end up taking that away from us, we do have the right to a jury trial. That is the one check and balance that we do have. Hopefully that will stay intact. So, and I've exercised that right several times. And if you can, if Michael is savvy enough to understand how to go into a court on his own pro se and develop effective jury instructions and effective questions and put these people on the stand, he's going to have a jury there that's going to be weighing all this evidence. And I think with an effective presentation at a criminal trial, Michael can get acquitted. I went through this several times without a lawyer. But if Michael hires a lawyer, he's not a very good lawyer. He's going to be in trouble going into the trial anyway. The odds are stacked against him, especially in federal cases. The government usually wins those cases. How many charges are pending against Michael right now?
Two.
Two charges.
Two charges.
Okay. Well, Michael, I would say to you, this is, it's obviously, you have to weigh all this out, but just remember, and you'll have 12 jurors. They'll have in your felony case, there has to be 12 jurors. And I assume you've asked for a jury trial. Have you made that demand?
I have not made that demand yet because I was still weighing out if I wanted to take the plea deal or not. So now I was told by my attorney that there would be 8 jurors in this. And the information that you're telling me, the advice that you're giving me right now is good advice. And I've really thought that through over and over and over. And I do think that I'm smart enough to figure this out. I've got the fortitude to make it through it. But there's the real world, and then there's targeted bizarro world where they can get at everybody. And if they can fill the grocery store up with people that are going to stalk and harass me, if they can have people travel through town and follow me through town everywhere I go, have employees in stores play out skits, go on and on and on, have fake relationships with me. They can get to 8 jurors. Make your life better. Just make sure that this case doesn't, and that might sound paranoid, but that's what I've experienced is behavior like that over and over and over, where I think, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the right thing. I'm going to stand up for myself here. I'm going to fight for what I need to do, and then I get some kind of bizarro world reaction or outcome that doesn't make any sense. And so I've got the burn syndrome. You touch the stove and it's hot, and you don't want to touch that stove again because you burnt your finger last time, and that's where I'm at. And I'm financially drained. I am completely psychologically and physically worn out, and I don't know if and just to keep my business going through this court case, I don't know if I could juggle everything and manage that myself. I would need, some kind of help. I just don't have the team really, to do this on my own. And you've done this on your own. You're a special kind of person, man. It's to see you do what you've done is very commendable. I'm trying to be honest with myself and with the reality of the way things have gone here in the past for me, and just try to make the best educated guess, and hope that if I do take this plea deal, that I can make it through the probation. I can make it through the probation, no problem, without getting arrested if I just keep living my normal life, going to the post office and grocery store and running my business, taking kids to school and stuff. But if I can make it through that, there might be enough information, classified information that's been released about this program, people's names that have been released, to where I can actually go back and fight, where I have some kind of proof. Because if I go in and I tell them exactly what's going on now, that I've been stalked, harassed, slandered, that I'm on FBI watch list or whatever watch list this is, they're going to run me out of there, I believe. I don't know. And I'm not sure if I'm willing to just go all in and try it and then be away from my family for 7-10 years.
Fully understandable. Hey, Jason, can I share something very important with Michael?
Please do.
Hey, Michael, really you need to put your jury demand in right away, actually, because I can tell you this. In one of the 10 criminal cases in Indiana, the judge in my case, his name was Philip McGraw. He was a state superior court judge in Rensselaer, Indiana, Kangaroo Court. He denied my right to a jury trial and forced me to have a bench trial on a nonsense charge that he convicted me on. And then I took it to the Indiana Court of Appeals, and then the Indiana Court of Appeals reversed it and threw it out because I had a right to a jury trial. So one thing that you need to think about is this, in terms of your plea negotiations, is this: if you don't have a jury trial demand right now, they know that you'll have a better chance at to get acquitted with a jury. And I'm a little worried that you may waive that right. There may be a rule in that court on a certain time period that you have to assert that right. So you should actually assert your right to a jury trial, whether or not you end up, taking your case to trial, because you may waive that right.
Now, Brian, let me ask you this: if Michael should choose to eventually proceed pro se in a jury trial, as his own defense attorney, he would participate in the jury selection process and could conceivably ask questions of the individuals that, based on Michael's knowledge, could reveal if they are gang-stalking perps, and he could reject jury members who he feels uncomfortable with.
Well, the answer to that is yes and no. The particular judge I had in my case in the federal trial that I ended up winning, he would not let me do, it's called voir dire of the jury, where you ask them questions. He wouldn't permit me to do it because I was proceeding pro se. Now, I was able to do everything else in the trial, ask questions and so forth, But as far as questioning the jurors, the federal judge in my case wouldn't let me do it. So it would remain to be seen if they'll let Michael do it in his case.
I would need to be able to do that.
Yeah, why was that allowed, that they blocked you from doing that?
He wouldn't explain it. I actually filed a motion about it afterwards. He stated in open court he wasn't going to let me do it, and then we argued about it, and then I filed a formal motion, and I said to the judge, I'm pro se. I've handled this case from the outset to going into the jury trial. I speak good English. I'm educated. I can ask questions. I'm going to be questioning the witnesses. But he said, no, you're pro se, and I'm not going to allow it. There was absolutely no rational basis for it, and he didn't explain it other than I was pro se.
Now, if the trial hadn't gone your way, Brian, it seems like you could have appealed on the basis of the judge's refusal to allow you to do that. It's a violation of procedure, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I would have done so. He made it extremely tough in that regard and several other regards as well.
So it's also important that we realize that, you know, even if they do try to do things to make it more difficult for Michael to defend himself, if they aren't following proper legal procedure, Michael could appeal. And although it does take a lot of time, it certainly is going to take time to earn the money that you would need to pay a lawyer. And it seems like if you don't have a good feeling from your lawyer, and I'm not talking about Michael, I'm talking about anyone, paying someone that you don't think is going to do a good job to protect you seems like a bad idea.
Absolutely. I came to that conclusion many years ago. I was paying lawyers and not getting very much back in return, and I just felt that actually I felt that my own lawyers were in bed with the other side, and it's just a very uncomfortable feeling. And I just, from that point on, I just never would hire a lawyer after that. I trust myself, and if I can't trust the lawyer who I'm paying, then I'm going at it. I'm going to take it on by myself. And it worked out well for me. And I mean, it's hard to do. I'm not saying it's easy to do. It's very hard to do, and the system doesn't like it. But another problem is if even when you go into appeal, when you have errors, when you have reversible errors that you argue, a lot of times remember now, it's still going to be judges judging another judge, and they have something that they use, and I've read so many cases where you will actually prove that the judge was wrong, and then the appellate court will say, well, the judge was wrong, but it was harmless. It was harmless error. That's one way that appellate courts can help government agencies, police agencies along, without saying that they did a drastic injustice. Well, they were wrong, but it was harmless. But it's not so harmless when you're the one that is facing the jail time. Then it's not so harmless, but they don't see it that way. And as you can see here, the U.S. Department of Justice, when I asked to investigate what was taking place against me, they said, well, we can't interfere with a state criminal court proceeding. So in other words, in the United States, if you have a corrupt criminal judge, as I did for sure, and you bring that information to the FBI and the Justice Department, they turn around and say, well, we don't interfere with criminal court proceedings, and you can still go to jail. You get no help from the federal government. The FBI, the Justice Department is very, very untrustworthy, to say the least.
And I think we're learning a lot. We're learning a lot more about that now, even in the mainstream news, as we see people like James Comey, people like Andrew McCabe, Rod Rosenstein, Robert Mueller. They all seem to be part of this corrupt system. Michael, what do you think about all this stuff we're discussing?
Well, it's mashing all together, but to go back to one of the points, if I defend myself in this, I can't get all of the information from the police. They won't send me the body camera footage. I had the attorney request all of the footage, and I've told you before, they won't give me all of the footage of their. Were so-called chasing me. I wanted to see the footage of that. Nothing has showed up. Only the 911 call, this guy's statement, and a video of them opening some mailboxes out in front of my house. None of the other body camera footage has showed up of them interacting with me other than them reading my rights. But I asked for an attorney 4 or 5 times, and I said I don't want to say anything. I want to speak to an attorney first. They kept badgering me, asking me questions. None of that body camera footage is showing up.
Was that brought to the attention of the judge?
I'm sorry?
Was that brought to the attention of the judge in your case?
No, I've had no communication with the judge other than going up there with my attorney and basically saying we need more time for a plea deal. I haven't had any discussions with my attorney about any of this other than why I should accept the plea deal and arguments about why he won't listen to my evidence and telling me that gang stalking is, I might as well believe in lizard people or, you know.
Well, your attorney should be filing a motion to compel with the court, telling the judge that they're not providing the evidence. It's exculpatory evidence. It's evidence that could help you get exonerated in the case, and you need to bring that to the attention of the judge. The judge they can't just decide, well, I'm going to pull this information back and not let the defendant see it. If they do that, you have the right to take that to the judge, and the judge then can order them to provide that information. See, if you have that information, even your plea deals get stronger on your end.
Exactly. If my decision to making the plea deal change if I get to see that footage or not. You know, if they're on the body camera footage going, okay, we've been working on this forever. We finally got him. Let's make this a day. You know, something like that. That's in that footage. Then I'd have more to go on. But my attorney won't look at any of it. He won't listen to any of it. He won't have a conversation with me about any of it. He basically is just he keeps telling me the judge won't listen to any of my information about any of the organized stalking and harassment, that the only issue is if I pointed a gun at that guy or not. And it's not, there's more to the story. They need to go way back. And if I did represent myself, I would need weeks in court to even build up to explain to these jurors what's happened to me for the last decade minimum, you know.
Perhaps that's not what you need to do. One thing that we hear very often in legal matters is you don't want to, you know, we've heard Larry Klayman say that judges don't give opinions unless they need to. So perhaps all you need to do is present the evidence that you never wielded the gun and stick to that. Don't worry about the targeted harassment for this particular charge. Just focus on the evidence of the case and this particular incident. And if the lawyer is telling you all this stuff, perhaps the lawyer is running interference between you and the judge.
It really does feel like it. And I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, and I don't have anything against the Marine Corps. I've worked with the Marine Corps. I like the Marines. Sometimes I wish I would have gone into the Marine Corps. But my attorney is a former Marine. This guy that made these accusations is a former Marine. Don't leave anybody behind, and you also don't put another Marine in jail, and that could have something to do with that. I don't know, just something I thought about.
Well, his obligation as an attorney is to zealously represent you. That's his obligation. It's right in their code of conduct. So he's got to be representing you, and he can't, if he's implicating your defense in this case because of some feelings that he has about things, then he's not really zealously representing you as he should be.
I agree.
I actually question the fact that he's not bringing, if they're not showing you all of the evidence, it's exculpatory evidence, and there's a reason that they're not showing you that evidence. They're holding something back that can be helpful to you, and he should be telling the judge to order them to produce that information to you.
Okay.
There's a reason they're withholding it.
Yeah, there is. Sorry, I got off track there a little bit thinking about this whole thing.
No, don't worry about it. I mean, listen, Michael, a big part of what it is that they're trying to do is to keep you off balance, to keep you out of your right mind where you can calmly and rationally think about all this stuff, because if you're nervous, if you feel like people are coming at you from every direction and you're in jeopardy, it's easy to just become submissive and allow this process to overwhelm you. Now, Brian, you've sent me a bunch of other documents here relative to the variety of cases that were linked to this. Is there anything in particular that you think we should look at or talk about?
Well, this particular letter here is just I'm showing where where this is law enforcement officials between different counties, very adjoining counties, teaming up together and saying to each other, "Help me and I'll help you. We want to get them and you want to get them, so our departments work together so we can get Brian Vukadinovich." This is the marshal of our Westville Police Department in LaPorte County, the adjoining county, telling the sheriff in Porter County that my officer will come in and testify against Brian Vukadinovich in your case. That's the case that I went to the jury trial with and was acquitted. And so this is how they operate. And in fact, if I could revert back to what Michael was just saying, when we were talking about evidence being withheld, this particular letter that you're looking at and several other letters as well was a subject of it was the same thing. They wouldn't produce these documents to me when they were trying to prosecute me. Then the prosecutor in my case, probably just as the prosecutor in Michael's case is doing, knows that this information. See, I wanted this information so I could show it to a jury, so I could explain to the jury what was really happening, why I was really arrested and prosecuted. And the prosecutor, who is now her name is Nancy Vadic. She is now, unbelievably, the chief judge of the Indiana Court of Appeals. She lied at the criminal proceeding against me and told the state court judge, Mary Harper, that there were no letters that were ever written about me. She was trying to imply that I was blowing smoke, and the judge said, well, if they say there are no letters, there are no letters. So then, well, unfortunately for them, I had these letters. They didn't know that I had them. And then lo and behold, the day before the trial, they ended up choosing to dismiss the case against me.
How did you obtain the letters, Brian?
Well, I had various ways that I was getting information. I did have a police officer at the Valparaiso Police Department who didn't like what was going on, and then he was providing certain information to me. And then I filed a separate lawsuit, a federal lawsuit, where I got discovery from that lawsuit that was withheld from me in these criminal proceedings. But because they kept arresting me over and over again, the documents that I ended up receiving in the federal court discovery was very helpful to me in the criminal cases that they filed against me afterwards. It was just a never-ending thing. It went on for years and years and years. So,
how did you ultimately get them to back off and leave you alone? Or have they?
By beating them, they finally figured out after 10 arrests and after 10 false vindictive prosecutions that I wasn't gonna lay down, that they could knock me down, but I'm getting up, and I got up 10 times and fought them and showed what was going on, and they just finally figured it out. They figured something out that they should have figured out years ago, that I was going to stand up, and I was going to speak for myself, and I was going to stand up for my rights. They finally figured that out the hard way. That's what ended up happening.
Congratulations to you on that, Brian. You really are showing people the way things should be done. And I definitely want to remind everyone, Brian. Brian's book is Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case. And Brian details all of this in the book, talks about the rights that we have and how they are abused and how corrupt systems around the country have basically almost destroyed our criminal justice system. We've heard this from so many legal experts. Larry Klayman has shared his frustration with us many times. Jared and Elizabeth Beck have been frustrated by the legal system that they held in such high regard. Yale and Harvard lawyers who have brought that lawsuit against the DNC. Michael, it's getting very close to the point where you need to decide how you're going to proceed. And I know there's a lot of pressure on you. I don't want to add to that. I wanted to introduce you to Brian so you could hear some of the things from his experience and weigh those in your mind, how they may possibly play a role in what you might do in the coming days and weeks.
I appreciate that. I appreciate meeting Brian and getting some of this information and having somebody to give me some kind of motivation. I don't know if I'll base my decision solely on this interview, but it will be something I think about. I think I might need to buy this book.
Yeah.
And read this book. But yeah, it is a scary thing. I'm in a conundrum. I still haven't made a decision as what I'm going to do, but I have been known, when I played poker, sometimes I just go all in at the last minute. I didn't even know that I was going to do it myself. Right. And sometimes that would work out for me.
All
so
in,
who knows if that's what's going to happen here. But I really do appreciate the opportunity to get on here and talk about this, not just my case, but getting this information out for other targeted individuals too, because I'm only one person out of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, that are going through this same thing, very similar thing. Only they can find me a little more hardcore since I was going a little bit above and beyond.
Right. And for people who want to support Michael in his effort and support the notion that we should all stand up for justice and for our rights, you can do that on patreon.com/Michael J. Barden. Even if Michael ultimately chooses not to hire a lawyer, this type of defense is very time consuming, and Michael has children, a family he's got to take care of. So I hope that people will agree that it's the right thing to support Michael in this effort. And Michael, it also brings me to this article that you've shared from the Everyday Concerned Citizen. This article is about a proposed law in the state of California that would address some of this gang stalking. What can you tell us about this?
This is a big deal. This is actually, when I was on the Ella Free show, a talk show for targeted individuals, Dr. Matthew Aaron told me about this bill that's being proposed in California by Dr. Tomo Shibata, and that was the first news anybody had heard about it. So that was months ago, and now there's this new article on Romola Dahamara. I'm so sorry, Romola. I always say your name wrong. Romola D's website, Everyday Concerned Citizen, about this new law that's going into place, and it's going to hold police officers, psychologists, psychiatrists responsible for being part of this organized torture, of having knowledge of this and being part of it, instead of taking the requests and complaints from targeted individuals. If they bypass their complaints and put them into psychological evaluations, psychological facilities to become incarcerated because their complaints aren't listened to, then they're going to be held liable.
Right.
And there's a lot more to it than that, but it's been put into legal terminology to be read and reviewed, and hopefully this will be written in, and people can vote on this law and put it into place.
And you've reminded me of something important, that if the plea deal that they're offering you includes a demand for a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, we've heard from other people that can be a method that is used. Again, they're trying to force you into a corner, force you into a system that they can control. So once you are ordered to take a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, that can be weaponized against you, where they can say, hey, this guy is crazy, he's paranoid, he thinks people are following him, so now for his own safety, for the safety of the public, we need to put him into some sort of facility. That strikes me as a very dangerous circumstance for you to be forced into.
Yeah, either way. One side, I'm looking at defending myself 5 to 15 years in prison, if not more, if they don't come up with something else while I'm there. And on the other side, I'm putting myself into this controlled system of where I'm on probation. I have a parole officer. I have to go check in with somebody. When they tell me to, they can come into my house and search my home at any time while I'm on probation, I believe, which is fine. I have nothing in here but a bunch of hats and my furniture. And
what if they stick something in there?
That's the thing, though. That's the thing, because my home has been entered countless times while I've been gone. There could be something in here right now that I don't know about, and the first time they come in here to check on me for probation, well, guess what? I had some object in my backpack in my closet that some stalker broke into my house and put in there while I was at the supermarket, and I go serve the full term. And I go through these psychological evaluations. And if I say, yes, people are following me. Yes, I am part of a domestic surveillance program, and I've been stalked, harassed, and terrorized for years, for over 10 years minimum. they're going to say that I'm delusional, and they're going to put me on prescribed medication, some kind of SSRI, psychotropic drug, that would actually make you more susceptible to acting out in violence, which has been proven over and over and over. How many of these shooters have been on some kind of psychotropic or SSRI drug? I refuse to put that stuff in my body.
Right.
So that could be mandated too.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know. No matter what, I'm in a conundrum. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm going to have to make some kind of decision. But what I'm going to do, regardless, is I'm going to keep documenting. Whatever happens, I'm going to keep documenting until they take my physical ability away to do that.
Right.
And whatever I'm going through, it's a learning process that I'm going through. You know, my late great Aunt Emma used to tell me, Michael, there's no such thing as problems in life. There's only learning experiences. And you know, this is a tough learning experience. But if I can keep doing this and keep documenting and keep meeting great people like you and keep getting the word out about kind of stuff like this is like open source networking with computers. You know, just putting the information out, letting people absorb that information, and then go with it, and then keep like the ripple effect, like a virus, like a good virus, and let it grow. And you know, even if I don't make the right decision, I don't know if there is any right decision here. If I misstep somehow, I'll learn from it personally, and then maybe other people will learn from that down the road too. So.
Well, we hope you're able to make all the right decisions. I want to encourage people to visit eBay and go to Michael's store, Hats Around the World. You can buy a variety of vintage hats and collectible items. Your purchases, of course, will help financially support Michael and his family as he fights for justice. You can also go directly to patreon.com/Michael J. Barden and support him there as a monthly sponsor. Those interested in reading Brian's fascinating book about how he defended himself in both criminal and prosecuted civil suits as a pro se litigant can purchase Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case. Brian has shared a ton of important information with us about everybody's rights in the civil and criminal justice system. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. I'm sure we'll be back speaking to both of you very, very soon, and I hope that everyone will join me in just an hour only on Patreon for the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp. So please go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a sponsor. You support the show, and you're going to have an opportunity to enjoy exclusive content. I'll see everybody there at 7 o'clock. Thanks for watching.
It was a pleasure, Jason.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, Jason, good to meet you, Brian. Hope to talk to you soon.
Michael. Good luck to you. Stay
Thank
in
you.
touch.
All right, we will. Have a good day.